Before there were people, before there were cities, before even the first dawn, there was only water, sky, and silence. The world had not yet been named. There was no land beneath the feet, no path through the forest, no fire in the house, no voice calling across the fields, only stillness. And in that stillness, the makers spoke. They imagined the world into shape. Mountains rose from the dark water. Forests unfolded from the mist. Birds crossed the first sky. The earth opened its eyes. But the makers desired something more. They wanted beings who could speak, beings who could remember, beings who could give thanks. So they shaped the first people from mud. The clay figures had faces. They had limbs. They almost looked alive, but mud could not hold the breath of life. The first people softened. They collapsed. They dissolved in the rain and returned to the earth from which they had been made. So the makers tried again. This time, they shaped people from wood. The wooden people could stand. They could walk. They could speak. They multiplied across the world. But something was missing. They had no memory, no gratitude, no heart. They moved like people, but they did not understand what it meant to be alive. The question was not whether they could imitate life. The question was whether they were truly human. And so the wooden people failed. The world had form, the animals had voices, the forests had breath, but humanity had not yet been found. Then the story turns toward the ball court. Long before the hero twins entered the underworld, their father, Hun-Hunahpu, was a great ball player. He played with such force that the sound of the rubber ball echoed through the world. The ball struck stone. The sound traveled downward. Below the earth in the dark court of Xibalba, the lords of death heard the noise. They were not amused. To them, the game above was an insult, a disturbance, a challenge. So they sent a summons from below. Hun-Hunahpu was called into the underworld. He descended, carrying the sacred game into the realm of death. But Xibalba was not a place of fairness. It was a place of tests, traps, trickery, judgment. The lords of Xibalba defeated him. The father was lost. But death did not end the story. From the underworld came a strange promise of life. Near the sacred calabash tree stood Xbalanque, Lady Blood. The tree carried the memory of the fallen father, and from that place of death, new life began. The hero twins were born into a story already wounded by betrayal. Hunahpu carried courage. Xbalanque carried strategy. One was focused and steady. The other was clever and watchful. Together, they inherited an unfinished game. They grew in the shadow of the old defeat. They learned the rhythm of the ball. They learned patience. They learned how to listen. They learned that death does not always win by strength. Sometimes it wins by confusion, by arrogance, by fear. And so they prepared to face it with something stronger than force. They prepared to face it with intelligence. At last, the summons came again. The road to Xibalba opened. The cave breathed mist. The dark waited below. The hero twins did not flee the underworld. They entered it. To descend was to accept the test. They crossed the threshold between the world of light and the world beneath. Before them stood the court of Xibalba, black stone, wet walls, torchlight, thrones of obsidian. And upon those thrones sat the lords of death. The lords expected fear. Instead, they found players. The twins were sent into darkness, into silence, into cold, into the house of gloom. They were sent into the house of jaguars, where eyes glowed in the blackness. They were sent into the house of fire, where heat and smoke surrounded them. They were sent into the house of blades, where obsidian edges waited in the dark. Each trial was designed to break them. But the twins endured. They watched, they listened, they learned the shape of every trap. The underworld tested their bodies, but the real contest was for their minds. At last, the game began. The ball court of Xibalba opened before them. The lords of death watched from their thrones. The black rubber ball waited at the center. The contest had become what it had always been, a game against death. Hunahpu moved with focus. Xbalanque moved with strategy. The ball flew through torchlight. Stone echoed. The underworld held its breath. They played with rhythm. They played with timing. They played with deception. They did not defeat death by becoming stronger than death. They defeated it by understanding its pride. They let the lords believe they were in control. They turned every trick back upon the tricksters. They turned the trial into a performance. The game became ceremony. The ceremony became transformation. The story moved through death, but it did not end there. In the darkness, something began to glow, like maize pollen, like dawn beneath the earth. like stars returning to the sky. The twins passed through the underworld and rose beyond it. Death had been entered. Death had been answered. Death had been transformed. Only then could true humanity appear, not from mud, not from wood, but from maize, golden maize, the food of the earth, the body of the field, the gift that returns every season. From maize, the true people were formed. They could speak, they could remember, they could give thanks. They were not perfect because they were powerful. They were human because they carried memory. They were human because they knew dependence. They were human because they belonged to the earth that fed them. In the Popol Vuh, humanity is not made from metal, stone, or fire. Humanity is made from food, from harvest, from breath, from gratitude, from the sacred bond between people, land, and the unseen powers that sustain life. Gilgamesh asks why we must die. The Popol Vuh asks what kind of being is worthy of life. And its answer is not domination, not conquest, and not immortality. Its answer is memory. To be human is to remember where we came from, to remember what feeds us, to remember the dead, to remember the dawn after darkness, to remember that life is not possessed, it is received. And like maize rising from the earth, it must be renewed again and again.